Scared, afraid, cried, thought I was going to die. There was a hand on my shoulder, and it happened to be this nurse who I called her my angel. And she just laid it there, and I just knew I was okay.
The National Cancer Institute estimates that more than 1,900,000 people were diagnosed with cancer last year alone. Some of these people will face multiple diagnoses. Harry Poston is one of them. Harry shares the lessons learned as he continues to live with cancer and offers some words of wisdom for those of us who are walking this journey with family and friends. So, Harry, thank you for coming in and being willing to share your story with us.
Amen.
So let's just get right to it. So when was the first time you were diagnosed with cancer?
2006. I was diagnosed with chronic lymphocytic leukemia, which is a cancer of the blood. It's called CLL. And I was told that that would not kill me, but it would allow something else to kill me.
So what was your immediate reaction?
Scared, afraid, cried, thought I was going to die. And then a peace came across me. They said, just we'll continue to watch it until the blood work changes, and then we'll have to treat it.
So when you said a peace came over you, do you think that was God?
Oh, absolutely. But I didn't realize it at the time, I don't think.
So tell us a little bit more about how your faith has been part of this journey.
Well, in 2006, when I was diagnosed with it, I shared it with the congregation at Northampton United Methodist Church. And this good friend of mine came up to me, and he's a pastor now, Mike Ward. And he is about 6'5", 300 pounds. And he looked down on me and he says, Harry, I got something you want to do. And I got to look back up at him and I says, Mike, what is it? He said, you're going to make a walk to Emmaus. And I said, okay. And that really, really started my faith journey in a mature fashion.
How has your faith supported and helped you go through through your treatments and through what you're going through even now?
Well, I think it was in 2014, I think it's 2012. I had my first episode of where the blood work was starting to really change. So they put me in chemotherapy. So the treatment there concerned me a little bit, but I got through it and everything else. And they said we had 4 to 6 years before we'd probably have treatment again. So Nancy and I, my wife Nancy and I, got our bucket list together and we said, okay, we got 10 years off what we planned to do when we were retired. So let's compress it. And we tried to compress it to 6 years. We got 4 years out of it before we had to go get treatment again. And that next treatment was very scary because I had a bad drug reaction. However, I still remember the day I had that bad drug reaction where I went into shock, basically. And there was a hand on my shoulder, and it happened to be this nurse who I called her my angel. And she just laid it there, and I just knew I was okay. And you have those kind of things when you slow down and you can realize that they're there, and that's God there with you, just not somebody. I mean, it's just God put her hand on my shoulder and made me relax and feel peaceful.
So in the time from when you were first diagnosed till now, how many different kinds of cancer have you been diagnosed with?
I just got diagnosed with my 4th one. So I had CLL, and it transformed into, it's a very unusual happening that CLL transforms into another cancer. But we were packing to go to Florida for our snowbirding, and I noticed this growth on my neck. So I went into my primary care physician, and she looks at it, and she says, oh. And you really don't want your doctor to say, oh. And so it was transforming, and they first diagnosed it with being non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I overheard the doctors one night saying, he's got 3 to 5 months to live. Nancy was told I had 3 to 5 months to live. But they came back with the diagnosis, and they said, no, it's not testing that way. So a very small percentage get Richter's transformation. A much smaller percentage, even of that, get it to be Hodgkin's disease, Hodgkin's lymphoma, which I had. And that was curable. So went into immediate chemotherapy again, and that started shrinking it. And they knew, therefore, that what it was. Of course, in the middle of all of that, two things happened. One is that the doctors up in Akron, where we were at that time, said that there's nothing else we can really do for you. You really need to go either to the Cleveland Clinic or to the James. We have a daughter who lives down here, and we were leaving the other two kids in Northeast Ohio, but Columbus is a little bit sunnier than Cleveland is, and not driving down to the clinic was also a plus. So we decided to, in the middle of me being treated, buy a house, sell a house, and start the move to Columbus.
17 years. It's a long time to be living with cancer.
Yeah. But in the middle of this treatment, we were signing the papers for the house. And the guy who was our building superintendent, had a very, very bad cold. And when we signed the houses right after he used his pen. And because my immune system was really compromised at that time, I got acute pneumonia. And so I was in the hospital with that. And I remember her telling the nurses, his lips are turning blue. Is that good? And they said no. And I got rushed to ICU, and they were talking about my living directives on the way to ICU. But at the beginning of this whole thing, when we were trying to figure out whether it was non-Hodgkin's or Hodgkin's, I prayed to God one night, and I said, God, you're driving the bus. I'm just along for the ride. Let me just ride a little bit longer. And so when you talk to him that way, and he comes back and he gives you these signs, you just say, good, this is good. So we transferred the treatment from Northeast Ohio down to here. I finished up the treatments down here at the James. Then I went into radiation at the James. And then, of course, COVID hit right after that, 2020. So that kind of put a damper on doing things around here. But that was the second cancer I had. The third cancer I had was they noticed there was a tumor in my nose. And this was in the summer of 2021. And they found out that was metastatic squamous cell carcinoma. And I guess the size of it was as big as a $50. And they said they could either take half the nose and reconstruct it, or just lop the whole thing off and call it a rhinectomy. I think they do. And that's what they did. And so I have a prosthetic nose now, but they also took out 70 lymph glands. I had neck surgery. 70 lymph nodes came out. 11 of them were cancerous. And with radiation, and that radiation just really wore me out. And I was ready to quit then. They said, well, if you quit, it's just like starting all over again. So we persevered through it. That was a tough surgery. I think it was like 16 hours worth of surgery.
How do you keep going?
A bunch of reasons. One was my wife, who I love dearly. We're not done doing things together. The other is my grandkids, who range in age from 3.5 to 26. The 3.5-year-old and the 10-year-old really keep me going. One is kind of a commitment I made to God that I would like to disciple others on this journey, so that as you go down this road, you can either go down it feeling sorry for yourself, or you can take it and use it to your advantage to assist others and show others that, hey, it's not all bad. When I get up in the morning, I can either get up and be in a lousy mood, or I can get up and say, okay, who am I going to have an effect on today? And that's what I try to do. And am I worried? No, because the bottom line is that no matter how this comes out, I win. If I die, I win. Nancy loses, and I lose Nancy. I still win because I'll be with God. If I'm here on earth, I win because now I got Nancy and the kids.
And more people to disciple.
And more people to disciple.
Have you ever asked yourself why you...
I sometimes ask myself, why did God pick me to be able to disciple in this way? I've never questioned why me having cancer. In fact, one time at the beginning of this cancer journey, I thanked God for giving me cancer, so therefore I could share my story, because I never would have thought of sharing my story until I had it.
What are some of the lessons that cancer has taught you?
Be gracious. be forgiving. There's always somebody out there who's got it worse than you. All you have to do is sit at the James and sit in the lobby and watch people walk in and out, and you feel blessed. Faith and humor get you through this. It's amazing the reactions I get from the nurses and the staff about when I say that. Before we had this last radiation treatment, because I had a second dose of the cancer coming out underneath this eye, which was from just one little cell got out there and it caused this. It's in my bones. That's why the radiation, I just had the radiation. And as I sat there with the radiation oncologist, he said, "Are anything else you have to do with this?" And I said, "Yes, I want to say a prayer for you." And so I grabbed his hands, he grabbed mine, and we sat there in the patient room, held hands. He prayed for me and I prayed for him. It's amazing what that does for you and for the doctors as well.
If you were to give advice to somebody who, like somebody like me, when a friend has been diagnosed with cancer, what are some of the things you would suggest? Like if we're afraid to say something wrong or we don't know how to help, what would you say? What kind of advice would you give?
I would say get closer until they might push back. But don't be afraid to be there for them. And when they say, "Well, there's nothing you can do for me," don't accept that, because that's not true. We have a cancer support group at our church, and we meet by Zoom every Tuesday night. But it's just, I've been thinking about walking away from it. Then I get this note from one of the members who says, "This is just such a benefit to me." And you just say, how can I walk away from something like that?
I never heard of a church that has a cancer support group. That's kind of exciting to me to know that there are people out there that can share their journey.
Yeah, it came out of one of the Stephen minister. They had a thing about cancer support. So the Stephen ministers had it, and people showed up. And then the assistant minister there, Katya Rodbeck, said, "We'd like to continue this. How can we do this?" So I think everybody else stepped back 2 feet, and I just never moved.
And so you became the leader?
I became the leader, yeah.
Is that the group that you've led, even though you've been at the James for treatment?
Oh, yeah.
So some people would look at that and say, of all the people who have a good excuse not to lead a group, being in the hospital with, receiving treatment or with an infection as a result of treatment, that would be a good excuse not just to cancel the meeting. Why do you not cancel?
Because of people. If you can't help people, why are you here on earth?
Is there a particular scripture that is a guiding scripture for you?
It says that God's the potter and I'm the clay, and he's just molding me every day. And I'll never stop being molded. I haven't been put in the fire yet. So
how can people pray for a friend who has cancer or who's been continuously dealing with cancer for 17 years? I think we said this has been going on for you.
Yeah, just in daily prayer. I mean, just whenever. If it comes up, you're riding down the road, just say, "Oh, geez, Lord, watch over Harry, or watch over Judy, or watch over Nancy." And the thing we got to think about, too, is not only those who have cancer, but those who are caregivers to those who have cancer, because they're suffering, too.
So tell us a little bit more about caregivers and the difference that they make in the life of a person who's going through treatment and who's been diagnosed with cancer.
It's called unconditional love. The other thing you can do for them is just shoot them a note every now and then, whether it's a text or an email or a handwritten note. Just letting them know that they're not alone, that there are resources out there, and they need to take a break and get a handle on it as well, because they're suffering, because they're seeing their loved one deteriorate. 10 or 20 years ago, people didn't want to talk about cancer, but it has gotten to the point of where I never forget, when I first was diagnosed with cancer, I brought my team in that I was handling there at Detroit Diesel at the time. And I told them, I have cancer, and I don't know what the treatment's going to be or whatever else, but I appreciate your prayers, and we're going to whip this thing. But it's sharing information with others and not being afraid to talk about it. Having that choice in the morning when you wake up, you can either feel sorry for yourself, or you can feel good about the day and go out and help somebody else. So that's what I try to choose, and that's what I would encourage others to choose, because it sure helps I believe it helps the outcome. And I've had doctors who tell me, it says, if you have a positive attitude about it, that's some of the battle of being cancer.
So you mentioned quite a bit the idea of, seeing God in the midst of all of this. And how you feel the presence of God, whether it's a touch of a nurse's hand or tell us a little bit more about some of the other ways that you've seen God in the midst of your journey.
After my major surgery, I had a dream, and it was so vivid, and I could see every detail. And almost everybody I had come in contact with in my life was in that dream. And they were walking around and they were talking. And I walked around the corner and there was Jesus. And he looked at me and he says, "You're troubled, son." And I said, "Yes, I am." He says, "What can I do for you?" I said, "I want to make it through this surgery. I want the cancer to go away. And I want to be able to spend more time here on earth serving you and being with my wife." And he put his hand on my shoulder and he says, "Then it's done." And he disappeared. The other thing is, the one thing that helps you with this is it helps you slow down and you can see little things in life and appreciate them more.
Such as?
A grandson running across the room to give you a hug when you show up at his house. A nurse who you've seen before ask you how you're doing. The podiatrist I'm going to go to this afternoon will ask me, "How's my cancer doing?" And that's the one thing that really is beneficial, is having those relationships with others.
What would you like to say to our audience during times like these?
Show empathy, not sympathy, to those who have cancer and those who are caregivers. Because there's always hope. Always hope. And don't walk away, but run towards them with love and compassion.
Thank you for listening to Times Like These. Episodes are available wherever you listen to podcasts. If this episode has touched and inspired you, please share it with a friend. If you know of someone we should feature on this program, please let us know by emailing us at wocmedia@wocumc.org. We'll see you next time.